Speaker, the last one before our first break, Wagner Alegretti, Detecting and Understanding Bioenergy, the Bridge Between Consciousness, Brain, and the Physical Universe.
So, good morning. Thank you very much. I would like to thank SSE for the opportunity here. And I'm bringing this issue to be discussed here because I think it is going to help us to understand consciousness, many of these consciousness manifestations, and also convey a lot of different, perhaps, examples of consilience. But before I start this, let me give you a little information that I think is relevant for the context of this presentation. So I am an electronic engineer, have worked in so many different areas in electricity, but also I have been having, since I was very young, like 10 years old, what people call out-of-body experiences. And throughout most of my life, I had these experiences, and in parallel with studying, getting a degree, I have always been a person very much interested in experimentation since I was quite young. And then I always thought, look, we really need to have something more objective, more academic, more scientific, to see if we can prove this so-called out-of-body experience is real. I personally don't need that kind of proof, but certainly understand the respect when people who have never experienced this sort of phenomena, when they say, well, where are the evidences? So for a long time, I tried to bring these two things together. Over time, I start getting some results. So here you see just some images showing what I mean with the out-of-body experiences, similarly to what was discussed here yesterday with the near-death experience. Here I have a picture of some of the labs we have in our research campus in Portugal, where people go really to try to have this sort of experiences. But then, what is that I call bioenergy here? Because it's not a very precise word. People use many other expressions like life energy, biofield, prana, chi, orgone, subtle energy, therapeutic intention, and on, a very complete list of synonyms of bioenergy. In fact, contains more than 100 different words from different languages, different moments of our history. But my main point in this presentation is to ask you to think, well, is this kind of subtle energy real? Is something really objective? Or is just a way we use to explain some of our mind or consciousness manifestations? If it is real, is detectable? In which way? If we can detect objectively this energy, can it be measured? Can we give it with time a unit, a zero, a scale? When we can attribute numbers, quantities to some of these realities, as you know, our understanding, our science progress. Instead of being only a qualitative perception analysis, we can go to a quantitative analysis. So we can develop models, test equations, and so on. And something else that I always hear when I present this content, well, is it really necessary to bring a proof to the existence of this bioenergy, as we have so many cases of people who can do healing and so many anecdotal evidences? Would be useful if we could bring not exactly a proof of its existence, but perhaps ways to understand better how this form of energy works, because many times I see people trying to fit this into the known forces, interactions, or energy like electromagnetic field, and this was discussed here yesterday. But we see that many times it doesn't look like this kind of energy or force or interaction is electromagnetic. And a very important thing in my case, how does bioenergy relate to consciousness? Because when I was experiencing this kind of phenomena when I was young, even recently, when I feel myself outside of my body, being the same person I'm here right now, the same identity, memories, and I am out of my brain. So the brain is there, the work of the body, functioning well, but then when I come back to my brain, how this thing, consciousness, connects to the brain, makes the brain work. So when we do something like this, what are the properties, the special things in those special cells, neurons, that make the consciousness act on the brain and produce something like this? And as it happened with electromagnetism. So when we think of Volta, Faraday, Ampere, and many other people, Marconi, getting the same or the first evidences of this that we call electricity, magnetism, static electricity, until enough knowledge was collected for Maxwell to bring the equations and organize this in such a better way. So can we create in the future some sort of theoretical framework that is going to explain some things, perhaps is going even to predict other things? But then something really important here. As I said before, energy or bioenergy is not a good expression because according to my own personal perceptions, giving classes, courses on this for more than 34 years, studying books, going to congresses, going to see healing sessions and mediums, we see that many times what we call energy, as it was discussed here before, is basically a transfer of information. But many times this so-called energy behaves, manifests as a kind of a fluid or matter. Sometimes it's a type of a force. In some cases, it behaves more like a field. Then can this energy be something, kind of manifestation of the consciousness that we still don't have a name for? Or perhaps is all the above? So I know energy is not the most precise word, but just because it is the most known, popular, universal, I will keep using it for a while until we can come up with something better than this. With consciousness, things get even more complicated. There is no consensus or agreement on its definition, even more because some people see it only as a state of something. The brain can be conscious, can express consciousness, can be a property of something. Organic matter, in a certain level of organization, can have that property. But we see more consciousness as a kind of entity that is, in a way, primary, not only a result, something that emerges from certain level of organization. And then you will see that our own out-of-body experiences and even the study of cases of near-death experiences cannot be a kind of laboratorial, repetitive, replicated experience, but OBEs, out-of-body experiences, can. And I see that it's very important for us, any of us, even us researchers, even the theoretical ones, even the skeptical ones, to try to have their own personal experience. Here, by the end of the day, when we were discussing some things in SSE, we were getting some ideas there of how we could improve this kind of research. And one thing typical of the traditional research is to keep this separation, the research and experiment, the researcher and the subject. In this case, we study consciousness and its manifestations. I think it is very difficult for a person to go really further, deeper to the core, if the person has never experienced any of this. So we see that bioenergy is in fact, or subtle energy, is a kind of a tool, a bridge between the consciousness that seems to be non-physical, multidimensional, with this physical universe, is what connects us as consciousnesses to the physical body. And then let us see some considerations before I go to my experiments here. Bioenergy under different names, in fact, has been known for millennia. So when you see shamans there in my country, Brazil, in any other country, and you study the history of psychism, paranormal, there is nothing new about this. But I have to say that so far, the academic conventional science has not come with, how could I say, a proof, another understanding, detection that would be accepted by most of the people, reaching a consensus. So this kind of energy is possibly the vehicle of life as a whole in all its expressions, and mostly through this people call psychic phenomena. So we could say that if we think of consciousness as being multidimensional and reality being organized in many different levels, so reality is in fact different levels of organization of matter and energy and consciousness. So consciousness not being just a subproduct, a byproduct, a phenomenon of matter or energy. But then we come again to that question. How can consciousness, if it is non-physical, interact with the physical body? So is one of those big questions, yes, of consciousness. When I am out of my body, projected, lucid, in an out-of-body experience, I feel separate from my body, but how can I get back and assume control. Something that many times bugs me. Sometimes I go outside of my body and I return with a very complete, full recollection of what happened. But many times that recovery of memory is not complete. And if I can come back to my body with information, if this information was integrated into my brain, but not passing through the normal channels of our senses, vision, hearing, whatever. So this information has to come directly to the brain through any other kind of mechanism, effect. Our neurons have something in them, some proteins, some enzymes, microtubules, ribosomes, I don't know. They act like a transducer for the subtle energy to the physical energies, physical chemical reactions. And you see exactly that. The model for me is that bioenergy is the bridge between consciousness and our bodies, physical body, brain, but also with this matter energy of the dimensions where we are. So I have done many different things trying to detect this energy. So when I was still at university, having access to many labs, I used magnetometers, I used Geiger counters, I used so many different kind of sensors, transducers, semiconductors, nothing worked. And then I thought, look, I have to come back, thinking on the basis life is already the transducer to this kind of bioenergy. So I started using different proteins, measuring some of their electrical properties, like their resistance. And then I noticed that some proteins, when subjected to some form of energy transfer, healing, some kind of energization, they would change their electrical resistance. In most of my cases that I noticed, reducing that. So proteins, because of their particular behavior, being very complex molecules with a 3D shape that is important for their behavior, perhaps they can be a better bridge for this life force. But I don't have time now to show this. I would like to focus on the latest phase of my research. And then I thought, well, let me try to use nuclear magnetic resonance in different forms, different ways, to see if we can detect this energy or how it affects us, our brain, and perhaps even other kind of substances. So first I started with function MRI. As you know, it can show in our brain which areas are more active, which ones are not. This is basically done through the change of the natural magnetic resonance of hemoglobin. When some areas of the brain activate, they use the oxygen, and this changes their frequency. And also later, spectroscopy, that is used many times in chemistry to analyze the composition of some substances or the behavior of some molecules. So here you see a typical system of MRI. This is me inside of one of these machines. I believe that nowadays I am among the people who have been the longest, most time inside of a machine like this. I can tell you, at least to the best point I know, this is safe. Because I perhaps have, 50, 60 hours or more inside of machine. One session sometimes of this, like 3-4 hours. It's good that I don't have claustrophobia, okay? And then here you see fMRI of my finger tapping. One of the ways to see if the machine is working well, not too sensed, not too low. You start doing this, and then you see if it is working. You will stop, all the signals should disappear. And then you see if it is coherent with the laterality, the side of our body. This is just for reference. There is nothing special here, but it's just for you to see how much activation, these little points of light you get. But then now things get interesting here. There is one particular phenomenon very typical of out-of-body experiences, mediumship, channeling, that is called vibrational state. To some of you who studied, for instance, Bob Monroe, he mentioned this many times, and many authors. There are many books showing that people feel a very strong vibration inside of their bodies, a kind of internal resonance. We try to measure this with other kind of sensors. Is this electricity? Is this just a physical shaking? No, it is something else. But it's something that we can learn how to provoke, how we can induce. So we don't need to be just there waiting for this to happen. This is something that can be replicated. So this is me doing a technique in which we move our own bioenergy up and down. We start accelerating, and then we start feeling a kind of resonance building up. So here you can see my brain a lot more active than the finger tapping. So this is just me and other people. I did this many times. And then you see the level of activation there. We still need to see with more people how this will work. This is me when I get a vibrational state. So my colleagues, doctors, radiologists, they got very surprised to see, wow, but what is that? That can get such a level of activation and of different areas of the brain. Something that I had in mind. Is there a particular part of the brain that is going to be more activated? No, not so far. But one thing bugged all of us. This kind of image is out of the skull. As this is fine-tuned to hemoglobin, the bold signal, this shouldn't happen here. You can imagine what most of the people said? The buzzwords? Artifacts, anomalies. But you know, anomalies can be mistakes, but anomalies can be new science, can be new physics. So then I repeated this, and here did something different. Instead of just creating an internal resonance, I tried to irradiate, transmit energies out. The effects got even stronger. My colleague, a radiologist, just left the room, stomping out. My wife, Nancy, who is going to be here later talking, told me the whole story. He said, look, you are either breaking the laws of physics or you broke my machine. I got worried because these machines are really expensive. But then, well, we tried to separate all the variables. I suppose you know what is a fMRI phantom. Reference is just a bottle of water with some little things there. You put inside of the machine, has no metabolism. This should be the same, independent of any external condition, so you can calibrate the machine. So I did a lot of experiments with the bottle there, doing nothing, and it always gray. But only the moment I start sending, and other people also, energy to the water, these things showed up there. My friend got even more scared. I have a video, but time does not allow me. If you want, I can show you later here. But look, I put a chicken egg, because it's a much more complex kind of object, chemically speaking, but has no internal metabolism, has no behavior, is not prone to anxiety, expecting something to happen there. So here you can see before I transmit energy. When I start transmitting energy, all these images show up inside of the egg. You can see this in the video because when I start, you can hear the command from my friend, start. It takes 5 seconds and this thing's lit up. When my friend tells me from the control room, stop, I stop. It takes 5 seconds and these things, they disappear. Again and again. So it's an interesting, that's an artifact that follows my intention. It's a synchronized artifact. Because at the beginning we considered everything. Cosmic rays, having a shower of muons here, whatever, we considered everything that we could, okay? So the video is really interesting more than just the static images. Look, here is something even more interesting. One of my colleagues, I thought, okay, what about you doing something in the name of science? You know, don't you want to be my guinea pig? He got there inside of the machine, but without knowing when I was going to transmit energies to him. The idea is obvious, to cut off what? Expectation, some kind of worry, whatever. So here is his brain, you know, one example of many different moments, just waiting. But then when I started sending energies to him, can you see the difference in the image? The little dots of light appearing here. Certainly here we don't have the color resolution, but in the computer you can see this really well. So his brain showed the bold signal without any internal change. And later on, when I stopped, it disappeared again. So there is something there happening. I don't know if you know, but function MRI is very complex. The relation, noise, signal to noise is really low. There are problems with the statistical calculations there. It's very prone to this criticism of artifacts. So then I started using spectroscopy. That is more like a chemical analysis. Here you can see egg yolk, because we put an egg there, but we focus the whole machine on the yolk. This is the chemical profile. The machine is preset for some particular amino acids there. of the egg yolk before I sent energy, and this is later. I mean, under the energy. So you see here is like changing the chemistry of this. Here with egg white, basically the same thing. Here with collagen, look how the curves change. So this is a lot less prone to the artifacts. But here I have some discussions, conclusions, but I think we don't have the time. But my point is that one day, I think we will be able, let me see here, to create a whole technology based on this bioenergy. We can develop the components as it happened to electricity. So we can have a whole new form of technology working, functioning with this bioenergy. So later on, if you have time, I can show the rest of these transparencies and the videos, all of this, a lot more dynamic than was shown here. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Maybe we can combine, later on, we can have a couple of, show your videos, show John's stuff,
Perfect,
and do it before.
That would be great.
Anybody wants to come back, and we'll have a show and tell extra. Herb.
When you were trying to send energy, were you right next to the person, right next to the machine? Have you tried doing this remotely in terms of sending energy?
I tried from the control room that is outside of that Faraday cage. But I thought of doing this from a much farther distance. I still have to do that. But in this case, for instance, of the person, my friend, and the egg, I was out of the machine, but inside of the shielded, how could they say, area there. But I wasn't inside of the core of the coil there. Okay. Of course, besides the cases when I had my own brain there inside.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, Wagner, great talk. I'm happy to see that you mentioned something about an egg, and I'd like to follow that up with you. But
sorry, could you repeat?
I'm happy to hear that you used an egg and did
Yeah.
research on an egg, and I have some information for you. But
Really
what I'd
nice.
like to ask you is a wider question. People are increasingly talking about information, and I'm wondering if you could give us a more specific definition of what you believe that is, or what you mean by information.
Is one thing difficult to define, but information can be described as meaning or a level of organization of something. So it's the opposite of entropy. A system can be disorganized. Something can happen to organize a system. So this direction is less probable statistically. Statistically, you can go much faster to entropy. But I think even we could discuss of different types of information. Because when we say in healing there is a kind of information transfer, I don't think that kind of information is of the same nature of the information we have in bits in computers. Qubits, if you will, okay, entanglement, but we still know very little about that.
I was fascinating with you discussing in the very beginning the retention of the experience. Sometimes you get it, sometimes you don't. I was curious. William Bowman talks about it. Graham Nickel talks about it. Trying to find new practices and how to retain that information. Have you done any EEG experimentation to see what brain state the brain is in when you do these?
This was the first thing I did in 1992. And then I kept, some years, tried again, but now recently with a colleague who has one of these machines, just before coming here, like 4 days ago, we were doing this again. When I do these very same things under the EEG, there are some things very interesting. For instance, there is a kind of synchronization of many different areas. There is a lot of gamma waves and a very high frequency. What is interesting is that I have a lot of gamma waves in my frontal lobes and a lot of delta in my occipital lobe. It's almost getting the brain to the opposites. We don't know exactly all the aspects of that, but many times when you do this, you increase a lot your sense of self-awareness, proprioception. But we have to understand that better. Even the shape of some waves are completely different from the normal. But this is still something to be better discussed, but we have a lot of interesting things there.
I'd love to talk to you more.
Very
about that.
quickly,
Thank you.
please.
Thank you.
Very quickly.
I just wanted to make a quick conceptual concept. We tend to throw subtle energy all together,
Yes.
but if you read the literature of Chinese medicine and Qi,
Yep.
prana in Indian literature and Reich's orgone, I think they're describing different things. And it's almost, the metaphor I think of is it's sort of like, oh, we've discovered there's fluid in the body and we think of all fluids as the same, where there's probably a more attenuated thing going on there. So I just wanted to...
I think your observation is very timely because I see exactly the same way you were saying. There is a kind of natural energy, undifferentiated in the universe. It's a kind of energy. The energy coming from someone, from a person, is a different kind of energy.
Yeah.
When you feel energy from the ocean or from a big mountain, they are different. Yeah. So we have to be more precise with this classification in time. Thank you. You are absolutely
Really
right.
fast, John.
This is a great presentation.
Thank you.
I'm really happy to see you're finding these correlations. Have you done anything with biophotons? Looked into
Just with a friend, I suppose you know Beverly Rubik.
Yes.
So Nancy and I went to her lab like 3 or 4
Great.
times, and we got very interesting results. She considered the best results so far she got inside of that dark chamber, the one she did with me.
Oh, you know, I did
Because there
some-
was the largest change with the photomultiplier here in
Right.
my heart chakra, as they say, working with the energy or not, a big spike, and we just need to have an opportunity to go back them.
or come see me. We've done
Great.
some bioenergy with out-of-body experience as well, and seen some connections.
If I can talk
So,
to you
yes,
later,
we'll
I
catch up.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Before you go to break, just one quick announcement.